Iron Man is one of the most popular characters on the planet, and probably the most popular character in the MCU. Okay, maybe not the most popular because of this man right here, but he was definitely the face of the MCU for multiple years. But it's more than that. More than just being the face of Marvel's franchise. He's also the character that saved Marvel from going completely bankrupt. It's important to start out by saying Marvel was dying. Like seriously, they were on the brink of death. They found themselves buried under a debt of around $600 million, dude. Like, dude, what? But what was the reason for this? Well, more and more people started to buy comics back then. And not only buy comics, but start to collect them and stack them, hoping that they would hold great value in the future. So Marvel tried to capitalize on this. Capitalize on it by increasing the number of titles being published. So basically, they began prioritizing quantity over quality, resulting in sales not reaching the necessary levels for the company to survive. This strategy is quite noticeable in some of the comics back in the 90s. Looking at the Spider-Man comics back then, you had like 5 different titles. The Amazing Spider-Man, which was the original and classical title. But then you had Web of Spider, The Spectacular Spider-Man, and just a normal Spider-Man comic. And you had stories running across all of these titles, making it a bit annoying that you had to jump between titles to continue reading a story. Some stories in the 90s were awesome though, especially the whole Spider-Man's parents returning from the grave, only to be a couple of robots, but still, it really messed up Peter's head, making him completely abandon the Peter Parker identity for a while, becoming quote-unquote the Spider, hiding behind his mask and, you know, just not holding his punches anymore. That was a good storyline, but at the same time you had other stories that just weren't as interesting. Like the time when he fought a secret society alongside the Punisher and Moon Knight. Like reading that, dude, was just pure pain. It wasn't super interesting, and at the same time it was drawn out. So they definitely prioritized quantity over quality here. But the thing is, I'm talking about Spider-Man here, the most popular superhero on the planet. But this thing probably doesn't work for other less known superheroes. And looking at Marvel, they were able to sort of ride out the wave here, despite sales dropping by 70%. Instead, they diverted their attention toward the movie industry. Of course, it wasn't that easy, because you had a lot of legal battles at this time. A lot of boring court and trial stuff happened, but because of their economic situation, they just did a lot of bad deals back then, selling off some of their major characters to large Hollywood corporations. One of them being Fox and the other one being Studios something. Yeah, I should know this. Spider-Man and the X-Men were the most noticeable ones being sold. Other characters were Ghost Rider, the Fantastic Four, Thor, Daredevil, and many more. But of course, Spider-Man and the X-Men were the most impactful ones. Looking at those movies back in the early 2000s, man, it literally changed superhero movies forever. That first X-Men movie was just superior to anything we'd gotten previously. Hugh Jackman playing Wolverine is literally the most perfect actor ever. But of course, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man just took it to a different level, man. Having a revenue of around $800 million, just blowing X-Men out of the water. Marvel really made a mistake by selling the rights for Spider-Man, selling him for like $7 million. But how did Marvel overcome this? Well, of course, thanks to this man right here, Iron Man. This movie was such a success that it literally launched the MCU and just catapulted Marvel back to the top. At this time, DC was the clear winner, especially with their successful movies and comics over the years, of course referring to the Dark Knight trilogy and some other Batman and Superman movies. But looking at Iron Man, it was such a risk because he wasn't this famous or popular character like a Batman or a Superman. But what made it so great was the story. You couldn't rely on the popularity of Iron Man to carry you back then. So instead you had to create a compelling story. Billionaire Tony Stark gets captured by terrorists in the desert and manages to build an Iron Man suit. Of course, escaping and having a final epic battle with Obadiah Stane something. Yeah. The revenue of this movie was around $585 million, dude. Which of course is far less than what the Spider-Man movies made. But you have to consider that this was the first movie ever made by Marvel Studios. And to make $585 million on your first movie is just unheard of. Especially with an unknown character like Iron Man. And just look at the movies that followed this one. The Hulk, Thor, Captain America, Iron Man 2, and of course the Avengers. All of these movies made well and beyond what their budget was. And that's without me mentioning the movies that's been released since 2012. The MCU's made a total of $32 billion, being one of the highest grossing media franchises of all time. I think another reason as to why they were able to succeed was the casting. Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man is arguably the greatest casting job of all time. I know that I mentioned Hugh Jackman earlier, but this one is literally better. Maybe, I don't know. What I do know is that it was a risky move. This man right here was involved in a lot of controversies back in the late 90s, early 2000s, being arrested several times because he had drugs and guns in possession. The guy was literally a drug addict, saying that his father was a drug addict and had given him drugs when he was a small boy. You know, pretty messed up. It got to the point where he was in jail for like 6 months. But he was able to recover. And thanks to David Micel, hopefully I pronounced that right, Myself. Thanks to the previous president of Marvel Studios, he was able to get the job. Myself saw Downey Jr. as the perfect casting for Iron Man. No one else at Marvel Studios wanted him because, you know, of the past. But Myself was able to push through and get his man. The result? The launch of the MCU and just being catapulted to the top of the comic book world again. It's safe to say that Marvel's awesome, and all of their characters are awesome. Okay, maybe not all of them, but most, because this man right here is definitely not awesome. And the most important character in the 21st century has been hands down Iron Man. So thank you, Robert Downey Jr. Thank you, man. And to all the DC fanboys out there, you can just, you know, fall down some stairs or something. Yeah.